Hello, hello, everyone. This is Two Monkeys on a Microphone for episode 14. We've made it to episode 14. I can't believe it. It seems like we just started and we're already on episode 14. So today we have a very special guest. His name is Evan. I met him through my French program in Quebec. And we actually just met, was it 1 week ago or was it less than 1 week ago, Evan?
I think it was a little less, 5 or 6 days.
Yeah, 5 or 6 days ago. So I met Evan while I was cooking down in my pavilion, and we became close friends. And I thought, hey, it would be a great idea to bring him on the podcast with Ethan and just kind of for him to share his story. So today we're not going to have like a specific topic, but I think what we're going to do is we're going to talk a little bit about traveling, a little bit about kind of languages, because Evan has been studying French and he's come to Quebec, which is like a kind of a French-speaking place. And just wait, if you hear some dings, that's my phone notifications. I'll turn that off right now. And he's kind of just in a French context, just like me, and we're just trying to survive out here in Quebec. Ethan also, when he came to Canada, he was studying English and he came over here and he was in kind of an English context. So he's kind of experienced the same thing that Evan and I are experiencing right now in Quebec City. So first off, maybe just a little introduction, Evan, about who you are, what your plans are for the future, and maybe also a little bit about your past.
Yeah, so I'm Evan. I'm 21 years old. Studying French for 6 years, and I'm currently doing a French bachelor's degree at the University of Arizona. So I'm 2 years in that right now. I'm also an intern at a French company. So right now I'm not getting paid. I'm just doing simple work. But in terms of my plans for the future, I mean, hopefully I could get a job from that internship. Get a little bit of a French connection there, if you know what I mean. Wink, wink, nod, nod. And then honestly, that's pretty much my plans after my degree. I'm also trying to go on an exchange program in France to Aix-en-Provence. But we'll see how that goes out. In terms of my past, I'm so pretty young. Like I said, I'm 21 years old. I was born in Iowa, Des Moines, Iowa, which is a smaller city in the Midwest United States. And then my family and I moved out to Arizona when I was around 6 years old. So I would consider myself a Phoenician, is what they call it, someone from Phoenix.
Even? Yeah. Sorry. You're... no, nothing. I was just saying that thank you so much for being here with us on our podcast. I always love to have guests on. So I guess I think we should start by having a little bit of question about you. I know Josh just did that, but I'm kind of curious. So why do you choose Quebec as your first place to visit as a U.S. citizen? I mean, I'm sure that you have a lot of options, right? So...
Yes and no. So I have cerebral palsy, so I have to use crutches, and my mobility is pretty limited. That doesn't mean I can't travel in certain places. But I chose Quebec for French. So a little history. My first French teacher was Quebecois. She recommended Quebec. And then also for Quebec, it's almost like a mix between the States and France. So it's a nice stepping stone before potentially going into France. In a way to improve my French in an environment that isn't completely French without any English context. And then also, I've known a few Quebecois just in Arizona, so I was already familiar with the culture, kind of how things played out, how to behave, what to do, what not to do. So I chose Quebec, to be quite honest, because it's an easier place for me to assimilate to. And I'm like, if I want to go somewhere, I don't want to be a tourist. I want to actually live there and see what it's like. So since I have that background, I'm like, why not? Two birds, one stone, French, and I have that background, like I said.
No, and it's kind of close, right? It's, as you said, it's a good stepping stone before you go. Are you aiming to go to France eventually?
Yeah, I would love to go to France.
Yeah. a great stepping stone before there, because like it's somewhat close, but it's still like you get that French environment.
Yeah.
Well, what about you, Jacques? I mean, I know you're going to China right now, so I'm kind of curious on your thoughts about going to China in, I don't know, a month away. Do you feel excited? I mean, it's really far away. It's everything is going to be different. It's not like even here with U.S. and Canada. It's a total different continent.
You kind of caught me by surprise by that question. I wasn't expecting it coming, but yeah, you're right. I guess in some ways, I'm kind of doing what you guys are doing, and I'm going to a different country but I think the difference is you guys know the language. You, Ethan, you studied English before coming over here, and Evans, you were kind of working at a French kind of business before you came over here. So you're both familiar with the language. Mm-hmm. Going over to China, I don't speak any Mandarin and it's going to be weird because I've been to different countries before, and I've been to countries that don't speak, that I don't speak the language before, but not for 2 years. 2 years is a very long time. And I know that the people I'm going to be working with are going to be speaking English, but still like going to the grocery store, going anywhere really, it's going to be all in a different language. And it's a language that I don't even know the basics to. So it's a bit nerve-wracking, I'm not going to lie. But I feel like I was telling this to Evan just the other day ago, as long as you're moving and you're not in a void where you're doing nothing and you're just in a stagnant position, it's good. So I feel like I'm doing something purposeful, but I'm still very nervous.
Of course it's purposeful. I mean, this is huge. I'm really proud of you for taking that step. It is scary to be in that sort of position, but you take it anyway. That I gotta.
Let me ask you a question now, Ethan.
Sure.
How does it feel coming back to Canada, specifically Regina, after, I guess it's been a year?
It's been a year. Oh, and by the way, I forgot to mention when you were doing the introduction, it's been a year, roughly a year since we started this podcast as well. Time just flies when you don't notice it. But anyway, I feel very excited. Like, man, I don't know. Like, Canada has such a, Regina doesn't have a good rep in Canada. Bad things happen there. But for some reason,
we used to be the city with the most crime, I believe, in Canada.
Even have you heard anything about Regina?
Jacques mentioned it was the city with the most crime in Canada.
I just love how Jacques just like running around telling people that fact, even though it's not true anymore.
Yeah.
I said it was, but
I also told me it's where all the oil is. People love their oil.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I know about kind.
So Regina is like a very small city, and very people make fun of it for being very empty and boring and having nothing to do. What's the most rural place in the U.S. that you can think of?
Probably Wyoming, somewhere in the state of Wyoming. There's only 500,000 people in the entire state.
Wow.
Wow, that is something.
That is something. But
I think
I might be entirely wrong, but I read that somewhere. But it's known for being petite.
I think Regina is 250,000, which isn't many.
Yeah, for a city, it's quite small. I mean, even my home city has like 1 million people. Anyway, that's not the point. The point is, Regina is very, like people think it's very boring and having nothing to do. But on the other hand, it was the first place that I got to travel internationally. So it left a lot of good great impression on the people, on the place. And now the thing that I'm coming back, it's unreal. I mean, I've never thought that I would be able to do so, and now I'm returning to a place that is a lot of emotions. I feel like I'm counting days until I get to travel to Regina. You have no idea.
I think that you brought up a good point, Ethan and Evan, like about population size. Both of you guys are coming from bigger cities to smaller cities. Like Quebec in comparison to Phoenix is like, it's a smaller city. And of course, Hanoi compared to Regina is also like, the population size in comparison is quite drastic. And that kind of got me thinking, does population size matter in a city, do you think?
100%.
That's a good
100%. I would say, it dictates people's behavior. Like I noticed when I'm in Quebec, people greet me on the street because they recognize that I was in their cafe. You see the same people every day. You develop there's that kind of small town rapport and that kind of connection. I don't think that sociability can take place in bigger cities just because people are in and out and in and out. So I would say 100%.
Do you like it more? Do you like the sense of community in smaller places?
Yeah, I like that a lot more. I mean, obviously there's other things to weigh in a small city. But that sense of community, definitely.
Mm-hmm. Now, here's the interesting...
How about you, Ethan?
Yeah, I was going to mention. Here's the interesting thing. Even though Hanoi is a really big city, it's probably like the second largest here. It has like 10 million people, which is huge. There's so many people. You still get that sense of community, which is very odd because like if you walk downtown Vancouver, it's not like I've been to Vancouver a lot, but if you walk downtown in places like Vancouver and you greet someone, that will be considered weird.
Yeah.
But here, if you go to the same, like let's say you go to the same cafe, you go to the same restaurant every day, people are gonna recognize you. They're gonna start remembering your name. They're gonna say hi to you. And it's not just about the places you go. It's also about your neighbors and people that live around you. The sense of community is really strong here. And I think that's the reason why people like Vietnam so much. People kind of used to the sort of society in the West, how everyone doesn't talk to each other, that sort of stuff. And then when they come here, everything's just different, even though it's so big. So basically you got all the best in the world. You got all the services that you need, but you can also get the sense of community. Back to Jock's question, I think population really matters. It dictates how your life is, basically. And, where people is where the job is, how much you get paid, and how much you're gonna pay for foods and for items, things like that. So I think it's really important. And I think the question is so good because compared to Hanoi, Regina doesn't have much to offer when it comes to like population and the things that you can do. But I love it. I love it so much because here's the thing. For the first time in my life, I actually feel like I could go outside and breathe and actually enjoy the atmosphere. Because here it's just so crowded with people. Everywhere you go, you see cars, you see streets, you see concrete, and life is just kind of it feels really rushed. I feel like, and I don't feel like that in Regina. It's slow, it's calm. Maybe I'm just old, but yeah. That's just
we are a very laid back people in Regina. Things move at a slower pace. Everyone has a car, so it is a car society. But it's still like, it's not like you're driving a long ways to get to your work, or you're spending a lot of time in your car. Actually, most of the time you're spending kind of like, in your office, in your home, and places like that. And your home, like everything's so spaced out. So houses are spaced out, the university is spaced out, parking lots are spaced out, the roads spaced out. Our roads are so wide. Our sidewalks are really wide too. You just always feel like there's a lot of space, and you're never crammed in a box or a certain location. And yeah, I think it's a very nice place to relax. But I'll be adding, just to finish, I had the opposite experience. So wherever I go, it's a bigger city. So when you guys go to, when you guys had traveled, you always went to somewhere smaller. For me, I've always gone to somewhere bigger. And I can see like the difference between a smaller place and a bigger place. And I think bigger places, everything is usually managed a little better than in Regina. So for example, if you take the bus, at least in Quebec, you always know that the bus is going to be there in probably about 15 minutes. Just wait 15 minutes, the bus is there, you take the bus, it takes you to the location you need, and then you know that you're going to be taking the bus back. And in Regina, there's a bus system, but it's not always on time. There aren't many buses. Things aren't as well or tightly managed. And I think I really appreciate that from bigger cities with larger population.
Yeah, I haven't been to Phoenix then. Our transit system is not well renowned. I don't even use it. But that's interesting you say that, because I know just in Canada that transit's a lot better and there's less people. In the States, it's known for being unreliable and not the safest place to be. So it's funny you say that, because like in my mind, I wouldn't link population to organization at all.
Yeah, it's kind of weird. Like, I guess there's a sweet spot, right? If there's too many people, then transportation gets hectic. If there's too little people, transportation also suffers. But if you have just the right number, it's good. But I even think in like crowded, like when I went to Tokyo, when I went to Seoul, there was definitely messy areas, right? Especially Seoul, there was a lot of people on the street. And there's motorbikes on the street too, and on the sidewalk. And that kind of adds a little bit of chaos. But generally, like the train systems, the bus systems, they're really well managed. So of course, it depends on where you are in the world and kind of like the regulations and things like that and the society. But I think generally speaking, at least what I've noticed is when you go to a larger city, usually it seems like things are managed a little bit more efficiently.
Yeah, it comes back to the point I was making earlier about population size really matters. Things are better managed or seem to be better managed in bigger cities is because they have more money to improve in that sort of aspect. I think Regina really suffers because because the city doesn't have a lot of people, so it doesn't have a lot of incentive to actually improve public services. And that's why I like living in big cities, even though I'm really sick of it. But I love the idea that I can just go to any bus stop and wait for 5 minutes, and then there will be a bus for me. I really like that. But anyway, there's one question I want to ask Even is that, so you said that traveling, well, Quebec it's like a big stepping stone. It's like a stepping stone for you to live in France. And I was kind of wondering, is there anything in Phoenix that you miss? I know that there's some difference, and I know there's some similarity, but like, is there anything that you miss about the U.S. and in Phoenix?
Yeah, during my 4 weeks here, I'd say a couple things I miss is just there's not that variation. In terms of Phoenix is a pretty multicultural city. So you can go down to like the China and Korean towns of Phoenix and you can get authentic in Chinese and Korean foods. Or if you go down south, you can get authentic Mexican food. And there's more of that cultural melting pot that's there. So you could meet, like for example, I was in a cafe once and I met, two guys from Iran, a woman from Italy, and another guy from Cyprus. So it's like there's that melting pot there. That I missed. That I think at the university it's there just because there's exchange students, but I don't think it's there. And like if you go to downtown Quebec, besides tourists, but I'm not going to count that.
Yeah. I think Montreal is kind of more of that multicultural city where there's a whole bunch of different things. And I don't know if you get this vibe too, Evan, but I think Quebec is more kind of the old school, the
Yep.
kind of the older people kind of
Yep.
city.
Yeah.
You know, it's really funny when you mention about Canada having better public transportation than the U.S. because, well, not to say that my country's public transportation is any good, but Canada's not known for having good public transportation. So I'm just kind of wondering, like, what kind of system do you guys have down there in the U.S.? Like, how bad is it? Like, tell me.
Yeah, the issue with the states is right. They all have their own different levels of funding and how that works out. So I can only speak for Arizona. I mean, I've been to New York, I've been to LA, I've taken the metro in both those cities. And if I were to generalize, I would say things aren't as well. Like the states is organized. Don't get me wrong. It's not like you'll get like a 30-minute delay on a train, but things aren't polished. If that makes sense. Like there'll be a train that's still in use that's been used for like 30 years and like there's like 5 benches that are broken, you know what I mean, and nobody's just taking the time to refurbish it. And where I'm going with that, like the transportation is like in Phoenix, for example, there's like a light rail, right? And it goes throughout certain parts of the city, but it was made like 20 years ago and the city's gone from like 4 million to 6 million people, almost 7 million people in that amount of time. So they haven't updated the network at all. So it's somewhat useful, but in reality, it's pretty much obsolete if you want to traverse the whole city. So there's a lot of stuff like that where it's like the infrastructure's there. It's just things change so fast that it's hard to keep it up to date with funding and everything that's going on.
So it's almost like the city's growing too fast for it, its own good, almost.
Yeah, or funds aren't allocated to transportation. I mean, and like that depends on every state, you know.
Is there like a big incentive to take the bus or the train in Phoenix? Because like here,
Not
no. Okay.
no. So historically speaking, right, Arizona is one of the states that was founded by settlers in the 1800s. So it was all ranches before it was a state. So land was allotted based on like acres and land size. So what that means is Phoenix is a really spread out city. There's 4 mini cities in Phoenix that all are. Do you guys know Miles?
Nope.
A little bit.
Damn.
I know a little bit. but
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Because I was gonna say they're a good, like 100. I would say 200 kilometers per city. Like they're spaced out. Like it's not like a city on top of a city. It's their own little hubs. So like that being said, like the way it's structured, it's just not conducive for transportation. Because for example, like there's a city in Phoenix, Tempe, where the university is, where the transportation is very developed because they need that for the university and the students. However, the adjacent city, Gilbert, has more of an older population that doesn't really go out as much. So in order to build that transportation, they need to get jurisdiction from Gilbert to build that. But Gilbert's like, we don't need this. This isn't for us, so we're not going to fund this. So I think that's kind of the problem with the states as a whole. If you put that to a macro scale, where there's so many legal barriers, just diversity, that it's hard to get things going. There isn't that federalization in Canada.
I feel like, yeah, the bigger this, well, it seems like even just like in Quebec, right? There's way more laws that seem to be in effect than in Regina. And I'm guessing like even in the States, there might be even more laws than in Quebec and things like that. And just all these jurisdictions and these people, the rights of the people and things like that. And it just gets messy.
Yeah, 100%.
In Vietnam, I guess it's not as much of an issue with like who owns what and what the rights are to different places.
It's true, but we have a different problem. We have a different fish to deal with. You don't have, well, we have everything is owned by the government. Yeah, but it doesn't necessarily mean that things are easier here. yeah, especially when it comes to land. Our land system and our laws on land use is very, very messy. And the thing about Vietnam is like it's very crowded. There's a lot of people live here. And so when you try to build something, right, you have to allocate people to new places. However, the policy on these sort of land use and land allocation is not very clear. And so it takes them years to just basically tell people to move away that they can build a train rail for example. This is why like we only have like one train line, one metro line in Hanoi. It is because it's not because like building it is hard. It's not like we don't have enough of money or technology. It's that it just takes so much time getting all these people out of the land so that they can use that. And it's not their fault, right? And the government can do better. But the point I'm trying to make here is that we do have different problems. And it's not like things are better here. It's not like we are a very public transit orientated society. I think there's a very little incentive here to actually use the transport system. And it's not just about the economy and about politics, but it's just about culture. We have a sort of culture and a sort of thinking that you as a person is worth as much as the amount of money that you can make. So like people will be like, oh, I don't want to take the transit. I don't want to be perceived as poor. I want to have a car. I want to have big houses, big cars, and that sort of thing. And so you don't hear a lot of talk about transit and taking the bus. Which is sad.
So
yeah.
So you're more of a car and bike society then?
Yeah, but definitely a motorbike society, as you can see. People just love their motorcycles, which is really sad because in terms of carbon emission and pollution, motorbikes are actually worse than cars. Sure, they save a lot of space, but if you have like 9 million of them on the street, then it's not going to get any better for anyone. And things are moving. People do know that, transit is good and we definitely need more buses and trains. But most people that I talk to either don't care or they be like, why would I want to take the train when I just buy a motorbike and, ride anywhere that I wanted to go to. So yeah, it's really interesting to know that even though we're very different, like I'm literally living on a different continent, but we have a lot of similar problems when it comes to transit. Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe we should go to a bit more of a positive topic.
Sure. Okay. Yeah.
Instead of talking about all the negatives of the country.
Okay.
When you guys travel, like I know, Evan, this is your first time traveling. Ethan, you've already traveled to Regina and you're back. What skills do you think you've gained from traveling?
Oh. Okay, I'll leave even to it. What do you think?
Okay. In terms of skills, I think a lot of communication skills. That might be a language thing. I just think on how to, right? Because when Jock kind of talked and I talked about this, like people behave differently in every place you go, right? So when I came to Quebec, I wasn't accustomed to how certain things they do or what they would do in certain businesses and that stuff. So I think what I've gained there is how to adapt to that, how to keep an open mind, how to kind of be a chameleon in that sense, how to fit in that mood, and how to just keep that adaptation going, wherever that takes me. I also just say the level of competency, you know what I mean? I think let's say you go to a new place and you make friends, it's what does that show you? It's if you can be charismatic across cultures or in different places, you know what I mean? I think that's also something to gain in terms of hey, things carry over.
And you had pretty hard. It was a pretty difficult start for you because you lost your wallet, right? And your phone at the start of the program.
Yeah.
So you had to kind of like, most people, they help to adapt to the culture and, the society around them by buying things, by searching things up on their mobile phone, by using those kind of things as tools to help them adapt to the culture. You didn't have your wallet or, your phone at the start, so it must have been even more kind of dramatic at that starting point.
Honestly, I liked it better. It got me out. It got me moving. Like there's something to be said. Like for example, if I didn't have my wallet, I had to go down to a part of the city to exchange currency because I only brought American dollars. But doing that every time taught me, okay, what are Canadian dollars worth? You know what I mean? Instead of just being like, oh, they're less than American dollars, so I can spend them willy nilly. It actually taught me like, okay, this is a real currency. This isn't monopoly money. So, like, and also just on a human scale, it also showed me like, hey, you don't need your phone to be independent. As long as you have your travel papers and an ID, you're all right.
What about you, Jacques?
Oh, we're going to me. Okay.
Yeah, because like you
I'm
clearly
not the person asking the questions. Okay, I'll answer. I really feel like I'm going to go back all the way to, I think it was 2019 when I went to Japan for the first time on my own.
Mm-hmm.
I've been to Japan before, with my parents, of course, because my mom's Japanese. But after that first Japan trip, because I went foolishly into a program where the courses were in Japanese, the students could speak fluent Japanese. Like I can speak Japanese, but I can't speak like fluent Japanese. Everything was in Japanese. There was no North Americans there. There was Australians, but not many Australians. So no one spoke my language. It was difficult at the start, and I really was questioning like what I was doing with most of my, over there in a full Japanese program. But because I survived that, I really gained this confidence in myself that, even if you are in a situation where like it really looks bleak because you don't know the language, you don't have many friends because a lot of the people there are from China or from Taiwan or from Korea, or you can still get by, you can still survive, and you can still even thrive. I think I was able to make healthy meals. I was able to identify restaurants that were cheap, that gave good food, and that that were just good options to eat at. I gained that independence that I guess I didn't even predict that I'd get by going over to Japan. I was just thinking this is a good way to improve my Japanese, but my Japanese improved, but I think what I gained more from that is this sense of independence. And when I came back to Regina, that independence allowed me to become more social and more kind of connected with other people.
I think I'm just gonna repeating some of the points that you guys have made, but I think that traveling is such a great experience to have. It changes who you are and it challenges you in a way that makes you grow, and I think it's great. And I can see that it helped you guys grow, and so did I. I was born in a country that's very different, you guys. Our mindset and our culture is very different, and it's very one-sided. And when you get out there, when you see the world, it's just challenge everything that the way that you know or what you knew about the world. And I think that's like the most important skill that I learned during my trip in Canada. It's like it puts me in someone else's perspective, right? Like I'm not going over there as like, oh, hey, look, I'm a Vietnamese. I'm gonna teach you guys how to be Vietnamese. I'm gonna show the world how my culture is like. No, I I learn how Canadians speak. I learn how people greet and how people shake hands, and I learn how to fit in, just like Evan said. And I think that's very that skill really helped me, like, you know, looking at things a little bit different and think in someone else's perspective. It's really helped me grow as a person, and I think that's the reason why I had such a good time in Canada. It's not because like it was perfect and everything was rainbow and nothing bad happened, even though it was true. But I think that by challenging myself to think outside of what I knew of myself and where I come from, it really helps me connect with other people. I made a lot of friends, like Jacques here. We're making a podcast together, and I also made a lot of good friends that when I return to Regina, I can call them and hang out. So I think that's the skill that I learned, among other things, and I think is like the best one. Just yeah.
And just to add on to it, like, your English is really good, right, Ethan? And like before coming to Regina, yeah, like, before coming to Regina, it wasn't like you were in an English context ever, but you just came to Regina. You learned, your English was already strong before you came to Regina, but I think it only got stronger after you left. And both Evan and I, we're speaking French here, and I don't know about Evan, but for myself, I feel like my French isn't nearly as good as your English. Even though I am good at speaking French, it still isn't quite on your level. So I think you also improved a lot with the language too.
Yeah, I think language helps a lot, and I think that's also the other thing that's great about traveling is you're not only like doing different things, you're also thinking different. You are like by speaking the language itself. But I don't think your French is bad. Like, come on, don't. No.
Well, you've never heard me speak French, so you don't know. Evan can testify to my French, but you can't.
So it works.
Okay, now I have one question for Evan. So, what did you think of Canada? Because like I never been to the U.S., but like, I've seen a lot of American movies, and in those movies, people tend to make stereotypes about Canada, and I'm just kind of wondering, like, how true is that? Like, do you guys really make this set of jokes in your daily life about Canada?
No, not in my daily life. I mean, here's the thing: is like Quebec is different from the rest of Canada, right? I can't, in terms like I know Jock and some other people from the English-speaking parts of Canada. I mean, yeah, we give Canadians a bit of a rough time, eh? But I mean, it's it's all fun and games because we're so honestly English Canada and the United States is so similar. That I was talking to Jock about this. It's not like we even see them as like a foreign person. Like I'm just like, okay, it's Jock. It's not Jock the Canadian.
Well, yeah, and it's, to be fair, like Canadians, make fun of the U.S. too. Like,
yeah, of course.
It's kind of like a brotherly sort of relationship of just making fun of each other. And as Evan just pointed out, like I mentioned this to Evan, like I don't think of him as Evan the American, and he doesn't think of me as Jacques the Canadian. I think Americans, like if they didn't mention they were Americans, there would be no way of identifying it. Like, and the same way, I think if Canadians went over to America, there would be no way to identify that we're Canadians, except for the fact that we always say A at the end of our sentences, at least over in Saskatchewan.
Okay, but like, do you see me as Ethan, the Vietnamese guy? Because like now I'm curious.
Yeah, I totally see you as Ethan, the Vietnamese. I think, that Ethan, the Vietnamese guy. I think it's a little different because you're further away.
I know.
I'm not saying that I do see you, but it is kind of surprising to just think that we're talking, like Evan and I are talking here in Quebec, and you're all the way, literally, like across the globe. Yeah, talking to us.
And like I did so many things to be there again, and the moment I'm there, you're not there anymore, which is sad. It's like the universe doesn't want us to have a beer or something. I can't drink.
If you don't know, Evan, like when Ethan arrives to Regina, I'm going to be off in China, so we don't get to see each other. It's like we're switching places.
Right.
Well, maybe we should go down to Hanoi and go to every place he goes, and then you guys can both get a knowledge of the two cities, and then you can meet in either one of them. And it's like you don't have to go through anything.
Maybe all three of us should well, you and I should go to Hanoi one day for a trip.
Maybe.
And Ethan can show us around when he goes back to Hanoi.
That is such a good idea. Yeah.
Because
Honestly,
oh yeah.
go ahead.
I was just going to say, I looked at Hanoi on Google Maps and it looks pretty cool.
Yeah. I was going to say, honestly, I was looking at Vietnam as a place to potentially move to, depending on how my job goes.
Oh,
Just in terms,
interesting.
yeah. Just because it's cheap and my job's remote. And right, the dong isn't worth a lot right now, which is good if I paid in euros. So
it also used to be a French colony.
Exactly. So there's a history there.
Well, there's definitely some French buildings, but I don't see the French culture is still here.
Yeah.
If you go to the south, then maybe that's different, but I don't know. But anyway, that's so interesting that you brought it up because I actually have an American friend who lived here for I don't know, a few years, and he keeps telling me oh my God, this is the best country in the world.
Ethan always tells me how Vietnam sucks and how he wants to leave. One time Ethan and I did this episode that never got released, and it was I tried to convince people to travel to Vietnam, and he tried to convince people to travel to Canada. But yeah, no, what do you know of Vietnam, Evan?
I mean, okay, so my best friend's girlfriend was Vietnamese.
Oh.
So I have a bit of insight about Vietnam, and just also because I'm American in the war.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, in terms of what do I know about Vietnam? Historically, culturally, I know right after the war, the North won, but we forced them to have a free market, but the government still runs everything. So there's businesses, but they're still ultimately owned by the government. And I know briefly about the French colonization and the Japanese years. But in terms of culturally, not super specific, other than that they're Southeast Asian, so it's almost like a mix between Chinese with a bit of Indian influence.
That's way more than me.
I was gonna say that.
I know a few. I do almost nothing, and then I had to do the challenge where I had to convince people to travel to Vietnam. So I do know a little bit of cool stuff, some cool locations to go to. I found that there was this kind of night bus that people can take where they can go from one city to another city, and it's just in this night bus where they have a bed and things like that, and I found that was fascinating. But yeah, you know way more than me.
You know what, guys, people kind of be kind of a little bit embarrassed when you ask the question hey, what do you know about Vietnam? Personally, I'm not going to be offended if you don't know something about my country. It's not like we're the top one country in the world where everyone has to care to us. So no, I don't really care if you don't know it.
How about if you tell us 3 cool things about Vietnam, Ethan? Just so that we can have something to remember.
Okay, first thing I can think of, because I even mentioned the war. We actually went to war with a lot of countries. Well, yeah, we basically went to war with a lot of countries. But here's the thing: we have a very a deeply love-hate relationship with China. It's been going on since the birth of this country. I'm pretty sure this country was born just so that people have something to fight against China and their expansion. So as you can see, we don't like our neighbor very much. So that's one fun fact I can say. And
How can you say this? I'm going to China, Ethan. I have to I love China shirt,
Well,
Anyway,
I mean,
keep going.
it's not like it's all terrible. I mean, I'm not. It's not like it's all terrible.
It's love hate, right?
Hate, love hate.
There's
a
some
love,
things you
there's a
love.
hate. Yeah, yep. The second thing is, we actually love the West culture. We actually look up to it, basically. And that may be surprising to some of you because we do have a very deep history on our own and our culture and our identity. We make sure that everyone knows it. But generally speaking, we love the West. I could say for certain, like everyone, including my parents, they'd be like, hey, oh yeah, the US, USA, USA. I'm serious. Ask anyone. They will love to go to the US one day. And that is very surprising to a lot of people because they think that Vietnamese hate the US for the war and what they did back in the 70s and 60s. I say that's true, but people moved on. And now people look at the U.S. as something that we rely on. Well, if you talk about politics, then people love the U.S. because they're like our best ally in terms of dealing with China, which has something to do with my first fact. Anyway, the third fact. Well, I mean, I don't know. I guess I only have two. But if you have questions,
just even something interesting that you think like would be cool to know about Vietnam.
Let's see.
Like the street food, the weird turtle shrines you have, that kind of stuff.
It's weird because like in a normal conversation, can definitely pull up something. But now if both you just like asking me, I can't recall any.
It's hard to think about it on the spot. Okay.
Yeah. So
I'll let you off the hook.
Anyway. So, oh yeah, by the way, you were mentioning about moving to Hanoi, moving to Vietnam. I think it is a great choice if you ever make that choice. I had well, it's not like I love my country very much, but I do have to give it credit. It's very affordable. Healthcare is cheap, very cheap compared to the U.S. and Canada. Food is great.
Ethan would know that. Ethan would know a lot about the healthcare. Like every week he's sick.
Exactly. I think that if you're like from the U.S. and Canada and like you have some health issue here, I don't think you would have any issue paying for the healthcare. It's very cheap, very affordable. Even like our best hospital is literally nothing compared to like one doctor visit in the U.S. Yeah. So it's very cheap. And they can speak English. So you don't have to know a lot of Vietnamese. But anyway, that's not the point I'm trying to make. The thing is, I had an American friend who actually lived here for a few years, and he loved it. He loved it because he told me that it's the sense of community. And it comes back to the point that you were making. Like, you love that. And I think if you like that, then I think you would have a great life living here. Because, like, people are so interconnected here. Like, your neighbor can be taking care of your children. Like, we're that close to each other. Because, like, well, I mean, it's a big city. It's not like it's like that everywhere. But you can feel like people know each other. People care about each other. People knock on each other's door to check on if they're okay. People walk together and with their neighbor and take them out for meals. It's those sort of thing that is very different from the U.S. and in Canada, where you have this very isolated life. So I think that you're gonna love it here. Of course, it's not gonna be perfect, but
I don't know. Maybe this is just special to Ethan, but for some reason, it seems like there's a good chance that you might find a girlfriend there. Because Ethan, it like every week, I'm just joking. Partly joking. But anyway, I won't get into it. But Ethan, he just went to see his mom, and he has a cat, and he was able to give his cat to a friend, and the cat took care of the friend took care of the cat for him and all that. So yeah, it definitely seems like it's a close knit community. Ethan, right now, he's staying in an apartment and he's sharing it with one of his friends. So like, it seems like there's a lot of sharing. There's a lot of care for one another.
Yeah. And like people are very genuine. Like they're gonna not look at you weirdly just because you come up with someone else or like your skin is a little bit different. People will, like people will just be like, "Hey, do you want to grab some breakfast with me?" This sort of stuff. So I think you're gonna have a great life here if you ever decide to live here, and maybe I can show you around. Would love. Yeah.
No, it's definitely on my list. Just because in the States, it's real hard to meet people. You were saying nobody approaches people just because there's so much crime in certain areas. And people are just so reserved culturally that, like, if somebody were to approach me on the street, I'd be like, what does he want from me? Like, that's the mentality. So it's really fascinating to hear that, especially like a big city. Because I just thought in Quebec, they're culturally isolated. It's a small city, so they gotta look after one another. But apparently, that can occur in big places. So, yeah.
You mentioned your list, Evan. What countries are on your list?
Yeah. So it's theoretical. So, right, Vietnam, France, Spain. Those are the big three I would say that I'm honestly considering, like without just being, I'd love to live there. But France, Spain, Vietnam.
Yeah, that's a good list. How about you, Ethan? Like, if you had to have a list of three places you want to go, I know Regina's one of them.
I was gonna ask you that, like, because like mine is like,
and then I'll answer afterwards.
Okay. Well, before I traveled to Canada, I didn't exactly have a list of where I wanted to go. I basically just wanted to get out of here and see for myself where I should live. But after Canada, I think that I fantasize about living in Regina. It's not like it's the best city in the world, but I have a lot of good feelings about it, and I would definitely love to have the opportunity to live in Regina. I would also consider Vancouver, but it's so expensive right now. People are leaving Vancouver because how expensive it is. And I think unless I'm a millionaire in the next 10 years, I don't think that's possible for now. And well, I guess for one more place, I think that would be in the UK. Or no, in Scotland. Yeah. I think I would love living in Scotland. No apparent reason, just Scotland. What about you, Joe? It's your turn now.
I always go where my friends are. So I never thought I'd go to Korea, but when I was in the Japan program, I made a friend who was Korean, so I went to Korea. Now that I have you as a friend, Ethan, I'm interested in going to Vietnam, checking it out. I wouldn't mind going back to Korea too. I feel like I have unfinished business there. And the last place, I want to say Europe, just because that's where I was born, but particularly Sheffield. But I don't actually have very strong feelings about going back to Europe and seeing Sheffield, where I was born, even though I don't really remember it very well. So I would say I've been watching videos about like Saudi Arabia and places like that. And I think that would be actually kind of fun. But I'm going to say China, just because that's where I'm going. And, it does seem like an interesting... It's going to be interesting because not only do they speak a different language, they don't have Google. And I live off of Google. So I think being able to live in a place that doesn't have Google, which is something that I often take for granted, will be very interesting.
Well, they do have services that are similar to Google, so I would say it's not going to be that different. But good luck. I mean, it's I'm very excited for you for some reason. I just would love to see you and hear about your life in China. That's going to be great.
What I'm thinking is it's getting a little late. I'm getting a bit hungry. I know, Ethan, you were talking about having to go get groceries a little later. So I was thinking a good ending for this podcast, just the last kind of discussion point we can talk about, is what we're planning to do in the future. Now, I know you're going to Regina and Evan's going back to Phoenix, Arizona, I'm guessing. But like, just even, let's say in 10 years, where do you see yourself in 10 years?
That was literally my question I had in my head, but yeah.
So we're thinking birds of a feather, right?
Yeah.
Who wants to go first?
Of course it's Evan. He's our guest.
But, maybe Evan needs a bit of time to think.
No, it's fine.
Okay.
In terms of 10 years, that's difficult because right now, I'm working on my French. I use it for an internship. It's pretty high. Like, I could live using French, but it still don't have that, like, mastery. So that, I think that would really dictate my plans. I'd love to get that mastery. Like, I'd love to be able to write, like, a 20-page paper in French and not have it be a big issue. But, like, disregarding that, that won't take 10 years, obviously. So assuming that, like, that's done, honestly, I'd love to have lived in a couple places, have that under my belt. Whether it's, I'd love to be in a different cultural context, whether it be Asia, Middle East, somewhere like that, and in Europe. But in 10 years, I'd love to just be settled down in terms of not necessarily have family, but have close ones I care about. Potentially have a wife or a long-term girlfriend, and be ready to, like I said, settle down, but continue developing after that kind of adventurous stage in my life. Because I feel like my 20s are my time to kind of dip my feet in everywhere and understand, really what life's about in terms of just cross-culturally, like what I can develop the skills. I feel like 10 years down the line, it's like, okay, I found my niche. I've developed kind of a hierarchy of my priorities, know who I am, and I kind of be ready to slow things down, develop from there.
Well, Evan, sorry, you were saying?
No, I was finished.
Oh, okay. So no, it's nothing. I was just gonna say that. Well, we don't know each other very well. It's only first date, but I do wish you the best. It sounds like a very ambitious plan that you have for yourself in the next 10 years, and I hope that things works out for you. And maybe, who knows? Maybe in 10 years, this podcast is still alive, and we're gonna spend some time and reflect on this. But yeah.
Well, hopefully we'll all have been met in Vietnam once again on a nice big journey together.
Yes. Let's just anyway. What about you, Jock? Where you see yourself in 10 years?
You're ending it off. Hey, you're gonna end us off strong, Ethan? Okay. Well, for me, I think in 10 years, I'm going to be 34. My parents are going to be pretty old. I think they'll be in their 60s. So I hope to I want to kind of leave them and then eventually come back just for when they're older. I am an only child, so I do care a lot about my parents. So I hope to be kind of close by to provide support for them. Like Evan, I would like to have a family. I don't need too many kids, maybe one or two. That's good enough for me. I hope that I will have had, I'll be teaching, teaching for probably at least 7 years or something like that, in a high school, and probably English. But I think I wouldn't mind also having a break after 7 years of teaching. Maybe I would have saved up a little bit of money, have a little bit of a break, draw or write a comic book or do something creative, and then go back to teaching.
Well, John, I'm your friend, and
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
and as a friend, I am very proud of you and what you've done, and I think that you got a very bright future ahead. And I really do believe that. Well, I tend to be very realistic, but when it comes to my friends, I believe in them, and I do believe that you will get there. And hopefully one day, I hope this podcast is gonna last for 10 years, and we're gonna remember about the things that we said today, and we're gonna reflect back, and hopefully you're there. Yeah. Anyway, me, in 10 years, it's really hard to say because I'm not that kind of person who plans a lot. Well, I do, but I don't plan ahead 10 years. But I would love to imagine myself passing that Canadian citizen test. This is actually something that I've been thinking about a lot. And hopefully that in 10 years, I can finally pay taxes, buy my own insurance, and start living off my own in Canada and not living based off government funded money and universities money, that sort of thing. So yeah, in 10 years, I do see myself living in Canada. I don't know how, I don't know when, but I really think that I will do it. And if I can do it, then I think my life is gonna be great. I'm gonna like that life. Family, well, I do like the idea of having a family, maybe settle down and have a wife, loving children, that sort of stuff. But I think that in 10 years is my primary concern is that I should be able to, love myself and feel whole and be really happy with myself, that sort of thing. I think settle down is a good option, but I don't think that's going to be possible if you constantly go like, oh my God, I hate my life. I hate myself, that sort of stuff. So yeah, hopefully in 10 years, I will be a little bit wiser, less dumb, and yeah, I think so. That's all I have.
That's good. I wish you the best with your journey to Canada.
Thank you. I'm gonna need your help, a lot of help.
Okay. Maybe. Does anyone have any final thoughts before we end it off?
Evan, is there anything you want to say?
No, I hope none of your dreams come true. Yeah, I mean, best of luck. Seriously, I mean, like, I feel like being in Canada has definitely been an experience. Just because, like, both of you guys are heavily linked to Canada in my mind. Just because it's all part of this whole experience. But, I'm really thankful for you guys inviting me. It's definitely, I was never expecting to do a podcast. Yeah, it's definitely a fun experience. I mean, thanks. Great getting to know you for that hour and a half I've talked. Yeah, thanks for inviting me, John.
Yeah, no, it was a pleasure to have you on, Evan. And this might not even be the end. We might even do another podcast with you. We've had another guest on. His name was Braden, and he came back on, I think like maybe a month later, to do another episode. I know we'll be staying in contact after the program, because I do have your email, and hopefully I'll have your phone number once you get your new phone. So there's definitely opening in the future for another episode with you on, and we can kind of catch up, talk about what happened after the program, because usually life takes us in different directions, and it's always interesting to catch up. Again, it was a pleasure to have you on. So just in conclusion, this is episode 14 of Two Monkeys on a Microphone. I hope you enjoyed the episode, everyone at home. And we'll see you next week, hopefully, if we're not too busy, to talk about, I don't know what. We'll find a good topic for next week. We haven't necessarily thought about it. Sometimes we just do things on the random.
We never do.
Again,
Jock, like you keep saying that. We keep saying, "Oh, sorry, we don't think ahead." We never do, but that's okay.
We never do. Okay, yeah, but look, it ends up, we get good guests on because of it, because we need content, and I can ask a whole bunch of people. So.
Anyway,
thank you very much for watching. Bye.
Ciao.